First guy I got to bring up here, and I got similar vibes. Again, not saying he's going to be Puka Nacua and shatter every rookie record out there, but when I turned on the film, I felt like this was a player that was mischaracterized in both the role that he played in college, specifically his final year, and how we can project him to the NFL, and that's Javon Baker. Like, I loved his film. I looked at how UCF used him as a field stretcher, and I'm sure you found a lot of the same things in your reception perception charting, Harmon, is that, like, they used him as not a one-trick pony, but a lot stretching the field. When you want to talk about ADOT, you want to talk about where most of his targets come from. But I think we could see Javon Baker, and again, talking about a player that was drafted in the 4th round of the NFL draft, I didn't agree with him falling that far. I had a late round 2, early round 3 grade on him. I would have liked the Patriots draft a lot more if they would have inversed their picks of Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. But looking at his profile, there are a lot of parallels that we can draw as far as loved his film, loved his ability to both play inside, outside. I think he can be a high volume wide receiver in the NFL, although he was used mostly in a field stretching role. But getting to the analytics and not just the film here, I mean, final season at UCF, 8th in yards per route run, 24th in PFF receiving grade. I talked about the yards per route run versus zone and man boxes that Puka checked in his final year. Baker was 31st in yards per route run versus man coverage, 14th versus zone. Both of those things play up because you're not going to see a ton of man coverage every single week in the NFL. Every single NFL team right now runs zone at least 54.5% of the defensive snaps. Over half the league, that mark is even higher. It's over 70%. So I look at Baker. He checks so many boxes for me, Harmon, both film, both analytics, and we talk about the depth chart. Like, okay, Jalen Polk got the draft capital. We think he probably is starting in 3 wide receiver sets. What are we going to see out of the Patriots after that, though? Kendrick Bourne, we don't know what we're going to get out of him. Is he going to be a full-time starter this year? Is he going to be healthy? Pop Douglas popped last year. He was a 6th-round rookie. Is he going to be a starter this year? I know the offseason buzz is pretty heavy for him right now. But Baker, if you were going to tell me in my mind's eye, like week 15, week 16, do I see an outcome where Baker is not only starting in 3 wide receiver sets, 2 wide receiver sets, but he's playing the X and he's leading them in targets on a weekly basis? I can easily see that happening.
So I love this candidate for a couple of different reasons. One, you mentioned what a role he was in at UCF last year. And yeah, I charted his games for reception perception. 35.6% of his charted routes in the games that I sampled were a 9 route. I mean,
wow.
Which is just absurd. Okay.
That's
and so
wild.
The fact that he has that route tree and still posts good success rate versus man, zone, and especially press numbers. And I get it. Big 12, stripped down route tree, mostly lining up on one side of the field in the game in the season that I charted, which is that final season. I had a few people reach out and say like that it wasn't always the case with his role, but at least in that final season, those can't be typical red flags of at least like a developmental player. I don't want to say red flags, but just like, hey, this guy might take a little bit to heat up, especially if they're coming from that Big 12 offense. But again, still super impressive that with that vertical roll, he showed an ability to get open underneath as well on like real traditional base NFL routes. So I really liked him a lot. I'm with you. I had him ranked much higher than where he went in the draft. And it's the ambiguous situation as you're talking about. I mean, I was on the Athletic Football Show with Robert Mays, and we were talking about this receiver core specifically, and I was kind of saying that, yeah, and I didn't even think about it this way until now we're having this conversation. They should do exactly what the Rams did last year, like throw the kids out there and figure it out. Like if I'm the Patriots, if I'm, Gerard Mayo and Alex Van Pelt and everybody there, I don't, like, no disrespect, but I don't really care what Juju Smith-Schuster has to offer at this point, or like Jalen Reagor, KJ Osborne. Like maybe KJ Osborne's like a depth special teamer guy, Kendrick Bourne, we'll see. But like, yeah, I want to throw these young guys out there and like see who can sink or swim, much like the Rams did last year. And what makes Baker so interesting, and you did kind of hint to this, that I think of all the other players in this roster, it's a lot of like slot or flanker guys. It's one of these things doesn't look like the other here with Javon Baker, which is that he is a traditional X receiver.
Yeah, I adamantly agree. And I think going back to the film for Baker, the other things that popped both in the conversation for Puka that translates into Baker is that the ability to not only win as far as route nuance, but the body control. Like Baker's highlight stuff is just insane. The body control where he's catching stuff either over corners, near the sideline, like all of that plays up. And again, like there is a lot of green. I just pulled up his RP profile. Like you're telling me this guy like has like everything. You talked about the big boy route tree, like he crushed it on curls and slants, and yet we're talking about this player who in his collegiate role was shoved into the box of being a field stretcher only. And I think this goes back to the testing. Like Baker was able to win in that vertical role, not because of straight line speed. He wins downfield, and you see he has to have the body control at the catch point to make up for the fact that he's not a burner. But if a team asks him to not do that, I think we see another level to his game. Like go out there, beat man, beat press, be a good route runner, which he already is, and he's going to turn into a high volume guy. Like my comp, and this might sound like I'm over my skis, but looking at his type of talent profile, and again, this is the high range of what I could see for him, but when I turned on the film, I looked at a player that could play outside and inside. The closest guy that I saw off of film that I compared Javon Baker to was Chris Godwin.
Ooh, that's interesting. I had him as more of like a Michael Gallup type of comparison. That's what I wrote in his reception perception profile. Producer Colin actually in the chat said that as well. He's a Cowboys fan, so he would know about that. But yeah, no, I think my comp is more like if he does just get stuck in this X receiver role, and because that was who all Gallup was. You know, Amari Cooper got to do all the like fun move around, like I'm a flanker slot type of stuff, whereas Gallup like, hey, go out there on the boundary and just like try to get open, which he did. And I thought Gallup was a good player before that ACL injury. So, but if he does grow, you know, beyond that, I think that's where your comp can come in as well. Cause listen, this has always been a pro Chris Godwin podcast. So I like that one a lot. And yeah, no, I again, I think we're kind of on the same page here with Baker, but